It was a bright and breezy Saturday morning when I, Kieran Hale, woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside my apartment window. The sunlight poured through the blinds, casting soft golden shadows across the walls. I stretched lazily and checked the time, already 10 a.m. A relaxed smile crept onto my face. Today was the weekend, and, as usual, it would be spent with the two people I trusted most in the world, Ilara, my girlfriend, and Kaylin, my best friend since childhood. It was our ritual: coffee, stories, laughter, the sort of routine that felt like home. Ilara and I had been together for 3 years. We met in college, drawn together by a love for literature and late-night discussions on everything from philosophy to the meaning of life. She was warm, intelligent, and had a laugh that seemed to light up the room. Kaylin, on the other hand, had been my partner in crime for as long as I could remember. We grew up together, facing everything from schoolyard bullies to the mysteries of adulthood side by side. He was the one person I trusted without hesitation, my confidant, the brother I never had. With Ilara and Kaylin, life felt solid, uncomplicated. But what I didn't know was that soon, this bond of trust, the very thing I cherished most, would begin to unravel in ways I never could have foreseen. I picked up my phone and texted Ilara and Kaylin to meet at the Ivy Cradle, a quaint cafe nestled on a quiet corner downtown. Kaylin replied almost instantly, his tone as light as ever: "Already got our table. Better hurry up, Hale." Ilara's reply followed shortly after, "Running a little late. Save me a spot next to you." A little later, I arrived at the cafe, greeted by the warm aroma of coffee and the soft hum of jazz music floating through the air. Kaylin was already there, seated at a corner table by the window. He looked up and waved, his usual half-smile in place. He wore his trademark black hoodie, the same one he'd had since high school, and his dark eyes held that familiar mischievous glint. "About time you showed up," Kaylin teased, clapping me on the back as I took a seat across from him. "Blame the traffic," I joked, rolling my eyes. "Where's Ilara?" Kaylin glanced at the door. "She'll be here soon. You know. She can never resist making an entrance." True to form, a few minutes later, Ilara walked in, her dark hair falling in waves over her shoulders, her smile lighting up as soon as she spotted us. She wore a forest green dress that highlighted her figure, her steps as graceful as ever. She took the seat beside me, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "Sorry for the delay," she said, with a small laugh. "You know how the morning can be." I shrugged, laughing along. "You're forgiven. For now." We ordered our usuals: Ilara's caramel macchiato, Kaylin's straight black coffee, and my double espresso. As we sipped and settled in, the conversation drifted easily, from work stories to weekend plans. Laughter flowed freely, and for a while, everything felt perfectly ordinary. But there was something, a faint undercurrent of tension I couldn't quite place. I noticed subtle, almost invisible things, like the way Kaylin's gaze lingered on Ilara, as if studying her expression a moment too long. And then there was Ilara, who returned his glances with a smile that felt slightly different, like they were sharing a secret I wasn't part of. The shift in energy was almost imperceptible, yet it was there, unsettling in a way I couldn't shake. But I told myself it was nothing. After all, these were the people I trusted most. The thought that something might be amiss between us was unthinkable, and so I dismissed it as a fleeting thought. That evening, back in my apartment, I found myself alone with my thoughts. Ilara had plans with her friends, and Kaylin had left for a family dinner. I sat on the couch, flipping through channels without really watching, my mind drifting back to the cafe. As much as I tried to ignore it, the image of Kaylin and Ilara's lingering glances lingered in my mind. It felt ridiculous to let it bother me, they were just my girlfriend and best friend sharing a laugh. But the strange feeling in my chest remained, like a quiet warning. Just as I was lost in thought, my phone buzzed with a message from Ilara: "Don't wait up for me tonight. Just hanging out with the girls." Love you. I typed a quick response, telling her to have fun, but even as I pressed send, that feeling crept back, stronger this time. It was as if a faint crack had appeared in the solid ground I'd always stood on. Then, a message from Kalen popped up, "Hey, just checking in. You alright?" I paused, frowning slightly. It was unusual for him to check in like that, especially since nothing had happened. I replied casually, "Yeah, all good here. Hope the family dinner's going well." "Thanks, man. Just wanted to make sure." I told myself not to overthink it, that Kalen was just being his usual, thoughtful self. But that feeling, the one I kept brushing off, sat heavy in my chest, like a stone. The night wore on, and eventually I fell into a restless sleep. But deep down, I knew that something had begun to shift. The sense of security I once had in my relationships with Alara and Kalen felt fragile. Tomorrow, I told myself, tomorrow everything would go back to normal. Little did I know, though, that this was only the beginning of a journey that would change my life forever. And with that quiet sense of unease, the first seed of doubt was sown. The next day began just like any other. I went about my usual routine, trying to shake off the strange feeling from the night before. Alara texted me early that morning, asking if we could grab lunch together. She sounded cheerful, and I took it as a sign that yesterday's tension had all been in my head. After all, Alara and Kalen were the people I trusted most. I had no reason to believe otherwise. At noon, I met Alara at the Olive Branch, a cozy bistro near her office. She was already there, waiting for me at a small table by the window. She waved when she saw me, flashing her familiar smile, the one that always seemed to brighten my day. "Hey, stranger," she teased as I approached. "Decided to show up on time for once?" I chuckled, taking a seat across from her. "Trying to make a good impression," I replied, grinning. As we settled in, we ordered our food and chatted, just like always. I felt myself beginning to relax, letting go of the unease that had gnawed at me since yesterday. Alara talked about her morning, sharing stories about work, her friends, and some vacation plans she'd been thinking about. But as I listened, I noticed something different. It was subtle, almost imperceptible. She avoided eye contact just slightly, looking past me at times, her fingers fidgeting absent-mindedly with her necklace, something she only did when she was nervous. "Kieran," she said, snapping me out of my thoughts. "Did you hear what I said?" I blinked, realizing I hadn't heard a word of her last sentence. "Sorry, I got lost in thought for a second." "What were you saying?" She laughed lightly, but it felt forced. "I was asking if you'd be up for a weekend trip with Kalen and me. Maybe next month." The mention of Kalen caught me off guard, and a shadow of last night's doubt surfaced. "A trip?" "Sure. Where were you thinking?" "Somewhere quiet," she replied, smiling softly. "Just the three of us. Like the good old days." I nodded, trying to keep my voice steady. But inside, that seed of doubt began to sprout. I didn't understand why, but the thought of spending a weekend with Alara and Kalen felt unsettling. Later that evening, after Alara and I said goodbye, I decided to stop by Kalen's apartment. Part of me felt silly, there was nothing wrong, no reason to feel suspicious. But my mind wouldn't stop replaying the little signs, Alara's distant gaze, Kalen's message checking in on me, the glances they'd shared at the cafe. I stood outside Kalen's building, debating with myself, before finally pressing the buzzer. He answered almost immediately. "Kieran. Didn't expect to see you. Come on up." His voice was casual, as if everything were perfectly normal. I made my way up the familiar staircase and knocked on his door. Kalen opened it with a grin, his usual laid-back self. He gestured for me to come in, and we settled onto his worn-out couch, surrounded by the familiar clutter of his apartment. "So, what brings you here?" he asked, grabbing 2 beers from the fridge and handing me one. I took a sip, searching for the right words. Just thought I'd drop by. Haven't hung out in a bit. Kalen raised an eyebrow, a hint of a smile on his face. You sure about that? You seem tense. I shrugged, hoping to sound casual. Long week, I guess. Just needed a change of scenery. He studied me for a moment, as if trying to read my thoughts. I forced myself to relax, focusing on the posters lining his walls and the stacks of books scattered on the coffee table. But as the silence stretched on, I couldn't help but ask. So, about yesterday, everything good between you and Alara? Kalen blinked, caught off guard by the question. What do you mean? I mean, you two seemed close, I said carefully, trying to keep my tone light. Closer than usual, I guess. For a moment, Kalen looked away, his expression unreadable. Then he let out a short laugh. Come on, Kieran. You're overthinking things. Alara and I are friends, just like we've always been. But there was something in his voice, a slight hesitation, that didn't sit right with me. We spent the rest of the evening chatting, playing a few rounds of cards, and eventually, I left. But as I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. Kalen had always been open with me, his expressions clear and honest. But tonight, there was a guardedness to him, a wall that hadn't been there before. And then, as if to add fuel to the fire, my phone buzzed with a new message just as I stepped through my apartment door. It was from Alara. Good night, Kieran. Sweet dreams. I love you. I stared at the message, feeling a pang of confusion. She said it as if nothing was wrong, as if we hadn't just shared a tense, strangely distant lunch. As if Kalen's guardedness didn't mean anything at all. But my gut told me otherwise. I stood there, staring at the screen, my mind swirling with questions I couldn't answer. For the first time in years, I felt truly alone, as if the walls I had built around my relationships with Alara and Kalen were beginning to crumble, leaving me vulnerable, exposed. Little did I know, the cracks in our foundation had only just begun to appear. And as I went to bed that night, a single question haunted me, refusing to let me rest: how well do I really know the people I trust? The following week was marked by an unrelenting sense of restlessness. Every encounter with Alara and Kalen felt laced with invisible threads, drawing me into a web of doubt. I tried to ignore it, but the suspicion gnawed at me, growing stronger with each passing day. One evening, after a long day at work, I received a message from Kalen: drinks tonight? Just us. His timing was uncanny. I needed answers, a way to clear the fog that had settled over my mind. I agreed, hoping the evening might ease my suspicions, or confirm them. We met at the Ember Room, a small, dimly lit bar on the edge of downtown. It was one of Kalen's favorite spots, where we'd spent countless nights catching up or unwinding after rough weeks. The warm glow of the hanging lights, the low hum of jazz music, and the scent of aged whiskey reminded me of simpler times. But tonight, the familiarity brought no comfort. I found Kalen at the bar, nursing a glass of bourbon. He looked up as I approached, his eyes lighting up with the usual ease I'd known all my life. "Hail, good to see you," he greeted, clinking his glass against the one the bartender had just poured for me. But his smile felt different, like there was a hint of something he wasn't saying. We talked, our conversation flowing easily from work to travel plans to random memories of college days. It was almost enough to put me at ease, almost. But just as I was starting to relax, I saw him glance away, the faintest flicker of unease crossing his face. My gut churned. It was time to ask. "So, about Alara," I began, trying to keep my tone steady. Kalen looked at me, his expression unreadable. "What about her?" "I don't know," I hesitated, searching for the right words. "Something's changed between us. Or maybe between you two." His jaw tightened, barely noticeable, but I caught it. He took a slow sip of his drink, eyes fixed on the amber liquid as if it held the answers he didn't want to say. Kieran, you're reading too much into this. We're all close. Maybe you're just overthinking things. The way he avoided my gaze spoke louder than his words. I pushed forward, my voice firmer. Kaylin, I've known you my whole life. If there's something going on, you tell me, right? He paused, running a hand through his hair. For a moment, he looked like he was about to say something real. But then he shook his head, offering a tight-lipped smile. Of course, Kieran. There's nothing to worry about. I wanted to believe him. But that slight tension in his jaw, the way he looked past me rather than at me, it was like he was hiding something. I pushed down my frustration, deciding to let it go for now. If there was something to find, it would reveal itself in time. The next few days passed in a blur of half-hearted work and sleepless nights. The distance between Alara and me grew, as did my doubts about Kaylin. I felt trapped in a maze, searching for clues but finding only dead ends. The weekend rolled around, and Alara suggested we spend it together, just the two of us. The proposal felt like a lifeline, a chance to reconnect and put this strange distance behind us. We drove out to the countryside, staying at a quaint little inn surrounded by rolling hills and quiet trails. The scenery was beautiful, and for a while, I felt the tension in my chest ease as we walked along the trails, breathing in the fresh air and laughing like we used to. Alara seemed happy, her laughter echoing through the trees, and I started to wonder if maybe I had been imagining everything. That evening, we sat together on the small balcony of our room, sipping wine under the stars. The air was cool, carrying the scent of lavender and cedar from the nearby fields. Alara leaned against my shoulder, her hand resting in mine. For a moment, it felt perfect. Kieran, she whispered, breaking the silence. I know you've seemed distant lately. I tensed, caught off guard. What do you mean? She looked down, her fingers tracing circles on the back of my hand. I don't know. I just feel like, you're not as open with me as you used to be. I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. It's just, things have felt different lately. I can't shake the feeling that there's something you're not telling me. Alara's face fell, a shadow passing over her eyes. She let go of my hand, pulling back slightly. Kieran, there's nothing going on. I love you. You have to believe me. I wanted to believe her, desperately. But the words felt hollow, as if they were masking something darker. I forced a smile, trying to ignore the unease creeping back into my mind. I believe you, Alara. But as I lay beside her that night, staring up at the ceiling, the doubts refused to let me rest. Her words had done nothing to ease the ache in my chest, and I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. The next morning, we returned to the city, the silence between us more telling than any words could have been. I dropped Alara off at her apartment, watching as she walked up the steps and disappeared inside without looking back. I headed home, my mind racing with thoughts, questions, and memories. I needed answers, something concrete. I spent the next few hours scouring through old messages, trying to remember if there had ever been a time when I had seen a sign, something that might have hinted at this fracture between us. Then, while scrolling through my phone, I came across an old photo from a few months back, the three of us at a beach, laughing, our arms around each other. It was one of my happiest memories, a snapshot of a time when everything felt unbreakable. But now, staring at it, I noticed the way Kaylin's hand rested on Alara's shoulder, how close they stood. I shook my head, pushing the thought away. It was just a picture. But I couldn't ignore it any longer. The truth had to be out there, somewhere. And I was determined to find it. That night, I resolved to follow my instincts, wherever they might lead. If there was something going on between Alara and Kaylin, would uncover it. And if I was wrong, I would finally put this nightmare to rest. But as I stared out my apartment window at the city lights, a sinking feeling settled in my gut. Whatever the truth was, I knew one thing for certain: once I found it, there would be no going back. The days that followed were a blur of cold silence and muted anger. I couldn't look at Alara the same way anymore. Every glance at her was a reminder of the betrayal I had discovered. Each word she spoke felt like a lie, each smile she flashed felt like a slap in my face. And Kalen? I couldn't even stand to be in the same room with him. I'd seen him too many times as my brother, my closest friend. Now, he was nothing more than a traitor. But I couldn't just disappear. I had to face them, eventually. The anger simmered beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. I knew I had to confront them, but not yet. I needed to gather my thoughts, my strength. I wasn't going to fall apart in front of them. One evening, I found myself sitting in a dimly lit bar, the same one where Kalen and I had met a few weeks ago. The air inside was thick with the smell of whiskey and old leather, and the distant hum of chatter blended with the low strains of jazz. The bartender knew me by name now, though I barely noticed. My mind was elsewhere. I hadn't spoken to Alara or Kalen in days. My phone sat untouched on the table, though I knew both of them had sent messages. I couldn't bring myself to read them. The door opened with a soft jingle, and I turned automatically, knowing who would walk through it. It was too soon, but I knew they would come for me. Kalen stepped inside, scanning the room until his eyes met mine. He hesitated for a moment before walking over, his usual calm expression replaced with something more uncertain, almost apologetic. He sat across from me, his eyes dark, avoiding mine for a moment. "Kieran," he started, his voice low. "We need to talk." I said nothing, just stared at him. The rage simmered beneath my skin, and for a moment, I thought I might lash out. But I held it back. I needed to hear him say it. Needed to hear the words I already knew, so that I could move forward. But I wasn't going to make it easy for him. Kalen cleared his throat, taking a deep breath before speaking again. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy. But it's time I told you the truth. About me and Alara." I felt my heart stop for a beat. So it's true. There it was. His confession. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. I was done pretending. Done pretending I didn't know. "You've been hiding it for a while, haven't you?" I asked, my voice coming out colder than I intended. "All this time, you've been lying to me. You and her, behind my back." Kalen didn't meet my gaze. He ran a hand through his hair, his voice strained. "Kieran, it wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant to hurt you, I swear. It just happened." I leaned in, my fists clenching on the table. "How long, Kalen? How long have you been seeing her behind my back?" His eyes finally met mine, guilt etched into his face. "A few months, after everything started changing between us. It wasn't planned. But I care about her, Kieran. I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you, man." The words stung more than I could have imagined. A few months. That was all it had taken for him to betray me, our friendship, our trust, everything. I felt as though the ground was shifting beneath me. I wanted to scream, to yell, to throw something, but I didn't. I just sat there, staring at him, as if I were looking at a stranger. "You've really messed this up, Kalen," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "You've ruined everything. My trust, my relationship, my life. All of it." "I know. I know," he repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. "I was stupid. I should have told you earlier, but I didn't know how. I never wanted to hurt you. It's just I couldn't stop it." For a long moment, I said nothing. I just stared at him, the weight of his words hanging in the air like smoke. He had no answers for me, no way to fix this. And somehow, that made the situation worse. I stood up abruptly, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. I can't do this right now. Kalen stood up as well, his face pleading. Kieran, please, I shook my head, cutting him off. No, Kalen. I need space. I need to think. I need time to figure out how to deal with this. I turned and walked away, leaving Kalen standing there, speechless. That night, I returned to my apartment, a hollow feeling settling deep in my chest. The confrontation had been everything I'd expected and nothing like I'd hoped. I'd gotten the truth, but it hadn't brought me any peace. Instead, it had shattered something inside me. The bond between us, the one I thought was unbreakable, was gone. It wasn't just Alara and Kalen who had betrayed me, it was my own trust in the people I thought I could rely on. I collapsed onto my couch, staring at the ceiling, lost in a sea of thoughts and emotions. Anger, betrayal, hurt, they all swirled inside me, each one drowning out the others. I didn't know what to do anymore. Everything felt like it was slipping away. I closed my eyes, trying to escape the weight of it all. But no matter how hard I tried, the truth kept pushing through. Alara and Kalen had made their choices. And now, I had to decide what I was going to do about it. The silence of my apartment was deafening, as if the world outside had ceased to exist. For the first time in my life, I felt truly alone. And it terrified me. But in that moment, something shifted inside me. I didn't have all the answers. I didn't know what the future held. But I knew one thing for certain, I would find a way to rebuild. Maybe not with them. Maybe not with anyone. But I would find my way back to myself. Because that was all I had left now. And no matter what came next, I wasn't going to let their betrayal define me. The next few days were filled with chaos. A storm of emotions, broken conversations, and painful silences. But one thing became clear to me, I couldn't just sit here and let my life be dictated by the betrayal of the people I'd trusted. There had to be something more, something beyond the hurt and the rage. And I was going to find it. It had been nearly a month since the confrontation, and in the time that passed, I had allowed the initial storm of anger and confusion to settle into something quieter, still painful, but more manageable. I had given myself time to breathe, to think, to reflect on everything that had happened. But now, something inside me knew it was time to make a final decision. I had spent the past few weeks avoiding both Kalen and Alara. Their messages came and went, filled with apologies, with pleas for understanding, but I couldn't bring myself to answer them. I had no words to spare for them, not yet. The silence between us felt heavier than any confrontation could ever be. But it also gave me the space I needed to process. To decide what I would do next. The truth was, I didn't know if I could forgive them, not yet. What they had done to me, to us, felt irreparable. But deep down, I also understood something that made the hurt even worse. I had loved them both, loved them in a way that went beyond friendship, beyond what any betrayal should have ever reached. They were family to me, and the fact that they'd torn that apart felt like a wound that might never fully heal. On a warm, late afternoon, I found myself standing outside of Alara's apartment again. The setting sun painted the sky in a haze of orange and purple, but nothing about the moment felt beautiful. It felt like an ending. I had made my decision. Today would be the last time I allowed myself to be a part of their world. I raised my hand and knocked on the door, each second stretching longer than the last. When Alara opened it, her face softened with surprise, and then, almost immediately, that familiar look of guilt flashed across her features. She hadn't seen me in weeks, and she must have known this meeting wasn't going to be a happy one. Kieran, she said softly, her voice laced with uncertainty. I didn't think you'd come. I didn't answer right away. I stepped past her and into the apartment, my gaze drifting over the room, the same room I had visited so many times before, the place where I had shared moments of laughter, comfort, and love. Now it felt foreign, like a ghost of the past. "Sit down, Elara," I said. My voice calm but unwavering. "We need to talk." She hesitated but obeyed, sitting on the couch across from me. Her hands were trembling, and I could see the tears welling in her eyes. She was sorry. I could see it. She was sorry for what she'd done, for what she'd put me through. But in the end, her apology didn't matter. It didn't change the truth. "I know what happened," I started, my voice steady. "I know everything. About you and Kaylin." She winced, her face paling. "Kieran, I cut her off. I'm not here for an apology, Elara. I don't want to hear that you're sorry. I want to hear you tell me why. Why did you do it? Why did you betray me like this?" Elara's face crumbled, and she looked down at her hands, unable to meet my gaze. "I never meant to hurt you, Kieran. It just happened. Kaylin and we never planned for this. It was just a moment. And then, it was too late. I couldn't go back." I nodded slowly, taking in her words. I had heard variations of this excuse countless times over the past few weeks. But now, I couldn't pretend that it mattered. I couldn't pretend that I wasn't destroyed by the fact that the woman I had loved, the woman who had been my partner, had been in love with my best friend all along. "You know," I said, my voice tight, "I used to think you were the one person who would never betray me. But I was wrong. Both of you. You destroyed everything I believed in. And for what? For a fleeting moment of passion. Was it worth it?" Tears were now freely falling down her cheeks, and for a moment, I almost felt sympathy for her. Almost. But the truth was, I couldn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. Not after everything that had been taken from me. "It wasn't worth it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "But I don't know how to make it right. Kieran, I still love you. I know I don't deserve to say that after everything, but it's true. I love you, and I hate what I've done." I clenched my fists, my chest tightening. I used to love her too. I used to believe that we were meant to be. But love, real love, wasn't something you betrayed. Not like this. And I couldn't let myself be a part of that anymore. "I loved you too," I said, my voice quiet now. "But I can't keep pretending this didn't happen. I can't keep pretending I can just forgive you because you're sorry. I've been broken by this, Elara. And I can't fix it." She stood up abruptly, her eyes wide with panic. "Kieran, please. Don't do this. Please." But I didn't want to hear it anymore. I stood up, walking to the door, my steps slow but determined. I need to move on. I need to find a way to heal. And I can't do that if I keep looking back. I paused at the door, glancing over my shoulder. "Goodbye, Elara." The drive home was a blur, the streets unfamiliar, even though I'd driven them 1,000 times before. But something inside me felt different. The weight of the past few weeks, the pain, the betrayal, it was still there, but now it felt more manageable. It wasn't gone, but I was learning how to live with it. And somehow, that gave me hope. I knew that seeing Kaylin was going to be the hardest part. He had been my brother in all but blood, and now I had to face him. I couldn't just walk away without saying something, without getting closure for myself. But for now, I was alone with my thoughts. And for the first time in weeks, I felt like I was moving forward. The next day, I found myself standing in front of Kaylin's door, my heart pounding in my chest. I had no idea what I was going to say. I didn't know if I could even look him in the eye. But I had to. For my own peace. When he opened the door, his face fell immediately, and I saw the same guilt I had seen in Alara's eyes. But this time, I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I had made my peace with the fact that I couldn't change what had happened. But I could choose how I responded. "Kieran," he said, his voice strained. "I know this isn't easy for you." I held up a hand, stopping him. "No, Kaylin. This is not about me being mad. It's not about anger or regret. This is about me understanding that the people I trusted most, they hurt me in the worst way possible. And I can't keep pretending it didn't happen." He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Kieran. I never wanted to lose you. But I get it. I understand why you can't forgive me." I took a deep breath, exhaling slowly. "I can't forgive you yet, Kaylin. But maybe, in time, I'll find a way to let go of this resentment. Maybe we can be friends again one day. But right now, I need to be alone." He stepped back, nodding. "I understand." With that, I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of the last year lift, piece by piece. Maybe I wasn't healed. Maybe I wasn't whole. But I was walking towards something new, something that had nothing to do with them. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own life again,